Welcome to the Red Handophiles for lovers of artist Nick Cave's regular letters where he responds to fans' questions. My dad and I enjoyed the letters so much we decided to create the Red Handophiles podcast to discuss our thoughts and share it with you. You can read the Red Hand Files at www.theredhandfiles.com or follow the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome to our second episode of Red Handophiles. So today, me and my dad,
My name's Adam Bevan. Hi.
will be reading over Nick Cave's 204th
Red Hand File. And being as the podcast is new, Red Hander Files is obviously pointing to the idea that we are lovers of the Red Hand Files. We explained in our first episode that Hannah and I used to read these letters over the phone and talk about them. And all we've done is really brought it into the studio where we will share it with the world because we think it makes the world a better place. And if nothing else, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. So come with us as we explore Nick Cave's musings about the world and life and other precious things. So there is a question that has been put forward by Beau of Essex in England, the land of Ings.
What does Beau have to ask Nick Cave?
His question is a small matter of what is the point of life?
That's a simple question.
The simple question, what is the point of life? And let's see if we can unpick some of these words and find out together what the actual point of life is. We might even talk about what we think the point of life is. We might not.
Ooh. Stay tuned,
Stay
listeners.
tuned.
Stay tuned.
Same bat time. Okay. So, is there something you want to begin with? Is there anything that jumped out? These are regular letters that he is responding to his fans with words of beauty and encouragement. And we've decided to go back in time because we were originally going to start with this episode. And when we all got together, we had some technology favor. This is a new studio. I've got a few projects that we're doing here. And Hannah and I wanted to do a daughter and father podcast around this thing that we actually shared. But we've gone back in time.
And it's a goodie.
It's a goodie.
Couldn't let it slide.
No.
Couldn't let the point of life pass us by.
No, it's too big.
Yes.
Too important. So if you're at home wondering what the point of life is, stay tuned because we are about to nut it out together with Nick.
We got it. We got you.
All right. What do you got for us, Hannah?
So, straight into it. Second line. And I know I can see yours is highlighted as well.
I've highlighted it.
It seems to me that the common agent that binds us all together is loss. Huge.
I've actually gone on from there with the other line following it. And so the point of life must be measured in relation to that loss. Whoa. Life is measured in relation to loss. So I would say Nick's famously had plenty of loss in his life and even recently lost, he has 4 sons and he has in the last few years lost 2 of them to tragic deaths. And we've mourned with him in those losses. We can scarcely comprehend what that must be like for parents to go through. So he knows a thing or two about loss and he's talking about life being measured. Do you think that's true? Have you ever thought of that before? That the point of life must be measured in relation to the losses?
I think that is a line in there that didn't particularly resonate with me. Because I don't know if I would necessarily put them as relational. However, I do completely agree that the common agent that binds us is loss. It is a guarantee in each and every person's life, with each and every person that you meet, that they have faced some loss in their life.
Okay. So let me think if I relate to it then, because the point of life must be measured in relation to the loss. I think it's on the scales
Mm.
with the victories and the overcomings. They seem to sit in there together. I'm not saying it is the point, the only point, but it is in there as the other side of the coin of life, which is the joys of offspring, success with your pursuits of career or sport or artistic endeavors, overcoming illness, or some loss.
Mm. He follows on in it. And this is where the next part that kind of sat with me.
Okay.
Loss is absorbed into our bodies from the moment we are cast from the womb until we end our days.
And again, I was more taken with the following line: subsumed by it to become the essence of loss itself. And then he says, we ultimately become the grief of the world.
Mm.
So you want to talk about your bit? Maybe I'll talk about this. We become the grief of the world, because that was maybe my favorite.
Right.
Mm.
I love to think when a baby is born into the world, you hear they are perfect. He, she is perfect. And they are. A baby is perfect as it enters the world. However, the guarantee is that that baby, that child will face so much hardship. I think I read it earlier today. It was something like, we are wired to suffer.
Yeah.
That baby is wired to suffer. However,
Yeah. Suffering is the condition.
Yes.
Especially if you leave our comfortable first world environments and you go out and see the way that the rest of history has lived and the way that most people in the world experience their lives. Okay. We are wired, I agree. And this idea about becoming the essence of loss itself, it's not only the loss, but what we've done with it. The loss comes in so that we either sink into the despair and the darkness of the loss, or we emerge at the other end bright and victorious. And he says we ultimately become the grief of the world. It actually pointed me to the idea of Christ, the idea that Christ suffered for the sins of the world and goes into the Garden of Gethsemane, and then upon the cross the next day to suffer for the sins of the world, that the world is filled with grief and loss and sin and all the broken things, and that this God on earth was able to, whether you believe it literally or metaphorically, take those losses and griefs and pains and sicknesses and actually make them whole. And each of us are sharing that condition together. And it, in that place, becomes the essence of, or one of the essences of life, because we certainly all cheer when the football team wins, or somebody in the family graduates high school or university, or gets that job, or wins that, soccer grand final, or whatever it is. We are in those extremities most alive, but our greatest humanity happens as we empathize and feel each other's losses. And it does become, we ultimately become the grief of the whole world. Wow. Wow. There's some Jesus in there for me. Yeah. Anything else from the beginning? Any of these ideas of, we haven't got to the point of life yet. We're just really talking about life's full of grief and we become the loss, the combined losses of the world.
Well, on my last bit of that paragraph, he speaks of loss of humanity. And it is forgotten how much of a shared condition loss of humanity is. It is my belief that every individual, by the time that they've reached their 20s, has faced some version of loss of humanity in their life in its many variations. And the most isolating experience in the world, yet it's actually one of the most shared experiences by humans individually.
Yeah. Agree. All right. I guess that culmination of our lives and other people around us lives, and even strangers hearing about their grief. Even Nick, I don't know the man, you don't know the man, but we're here talking about him because we recognize that he's a person that has emerged with some sort of healing power through the sufferings that he's endured, be those that have been cast and thrust upon him and those that he has thrust upon himself. That there's a shining light there that makes him an authority to speak on such things, and I'm quite interested. I've almost forgotten what he said the point of life is, so I'm a little excited to rediscover that as we read. But he does speak about happiness, right? He's talking about how life has this irresistible beauty. I think he coined it, and he speaks about these moments of happiness are not experienced alone. They are dependent on a connection to the other, be it people or nature or art or God. And that's where meaning establishes itself. So now we've got this second thing. We've got loss and we've got connection to the other, which doesn't have to be people.
Yeah.
Often usually is. But there are some lone wolves out there, and he's saying, well, it's the other. I like that word. This idea of the other. Yeah, it's almost like we need these anchoring points, and he's building them. We've got loss, and we've got connection to the other. What else?
Yeah, actually, I'm just going to touch on again with the other, of like having things outside of other human connections, because sometimes people aren't ready to go there. Human connections have been too broken for them.
Yeah.
That they find it in other animals, in something greater, or in channeling it into art, or being heard and seen in art. I like it.
I've seen somebody do it with business. They couldn't,
And actually truly connected through business.
Yeah, they found their meaning.
Was it a mask or was it connection?
Well, sometimes it's the curse and the blessing. It's the same thing. It's a two-edged sword. But that's where I saw them make their meaning, because they were good at it and they weren't really good with people.
If they lay in their deathbed and they didn't have their connections with anyone else, would that business be like, I did it?
Don't know. Possibly. Yeah.
Or would that person, without knowing a single thing about this person, be like, I should have connected with people. I should have been more in nature. It's just like an area I struggle with, because I'm one of those people that's very deeply connected with humans and with nature. I could never see a business filling me or a job filling me, and me on my death being like, whoo.
Yeah.
You did good in the boardroom.
If only I'd spent more time at the office. Yeah. More time hustling on my. Yeah.
Yeah. I truly wonder if there's actually people, and absolute.
Yes, I think there are.
Okay.
But I haven't seen them on their deathbed yet. So I might
updated.
be. Yeah. Stay tuned for that one. they're older and they're still making their way towards that. And I've even asked, I had a guy stay with me who will almost never certainly listen to this, but I'll talk about him anyway, who stayed with me recently, was up in Queensland visiting, and he told me that, no, I only had the one kid, don't really like kids, they're hard work. Love my own kid, but yeah, and then spoke about his relationships to wife and family, and in the end he said, no, the only thing I really brings me joy is doing business. And he was from an Asian country originally, and he spent a lot of time over there hustling, and he was saying how much he missed it, and he only feels alive really when he's doing business, and the rest of life is boring. Should we go to the fair? Restaurants were good because that's a place you can do business. So food was, so I'm meeting these people. I'm thinking, well, there you go. But the connection to the other, Nick has wisely left it wide open. Whatever your other is, brother.
Yeah, I truly wonder if the boardroom can slide in as the other.
Well, it might be how high can that connection go. Anyway, I'll if somebody says it's pretty high, I'll believe it. I'll say, okay.
Oh, without a doubt. It's just me prodding.
And we're born to work. Whatever our work is, that's one of the things we know. Our meaning is also driven from work, like on the first episode. If you've missed that one, you can subscribe or follow or like. I think I'm supposed to say that as a new podcast person somewhere. Okay, well, I want to read this. I believe we are meaning-seeking creatures. Those are Nick's words, not mine. And I've often heard, I had a friend that used to talk about us being meaning-making machines. And we do. People will tell you what their meaning is. Even if they don't say my meaning is, you'll figure it out by being around them for an hour. But it's what he goes on to say when he says, and these feelings of meaning, relational and connective, are almost located within kindness. Now we're getting to something that maybe business can't do, right?
Exactly.
He's talking about a spiritual meaning as opposed to how I occupy my time and what is giving me some kind of dopamine, adrenaline, fixation rush that keeps me going. He's talking about this spiritual idea of kindness. Kindness is the force that draws us together. So business can bring you together. The sporting team can bring you together. A common interest in, the dog breeding, right? Whatever your thing is. But he says it's almost always brought about by kindness that draws us together. And he says, Bo, because originally it was Bo's question from Essex in England. He says, Bo, this is what I'm trying to say, that despite our collective state of loss and our potential for evil that exists, a great network of goodness knitted together by countless everyday human kindnesses.
Let me ask you a question.
Do
you think you're kind?
Let me preface your question, the answer to your question by saying the longer I get to walk upon the earth, the more comfortable I am with the darknesses that reside in me, the selfishness, the weaknesses, the laziness, the angriness, the whatever, the attributes that are not spiritual. And I feel constantly called to kindness. So I experience all of those things, from the idea of murder to absolute pious, beautiful, spiritual thoughts. But I feel I'm all of those things, and I choose most often kind acts. So in me, I'm all of those things, trying to move towards having a kind nature. But my nature is actually complicated by all other levels of darker things. But I recently was very angry at somebody who has been a big important part of my life, and it was strange that I was so angry and almost felt hatred, which is very unusual for me. But I was hurt. It's even unusual for me to be hurt. You know, I've got a sticker that sits on my mirror that says "Don't take anything personally," and I'm pretty good at that. But I'm wrestling like everybody else, and I'm trying to choose kindness, and I do pretty good with it. Do you think I'm kind?
Off the cusp, I would have said it, but I think after hearing your own discussion with it, I think that is a much truer representation of that question, in that you do try and move to it more actively, but sometimes your lower being self won't let you go there.
Yeah,
And
fail.
that's the struggle.
That's the struggle.
Yeah, that's
But
part of it.
I just want to
That's the
finish
human
the race
condition.
kinder than I started. And when I say kinder, I actually want my nature to be increasing in kindness. Increasing.
Your baseline.
Yeah, the baseline
Yeah.
is moving up. So where I've begun and where I've ended resolves at a higher place. More light. Yeah. Moving towards light-filled things, and kindness is... But is that idea of, is kindness the force that draws us together? Last episode, we talked about what we saw when we went down to Lismore with the flooding. And I think people must see it in anywhere where place has been ravaged by a natural disaster or war or an unfortunate event. Actually, a friend of mine's brother-in-law just committed suicide last month. And for all the tragedies around that and the things that don't make any sense around it, I saw his widow talking about how much beauty she experienced from the neighbours who all came out of their homes and started bringing meals around and dropping in with flowers. She said, I had to give the flowers away. I couldn't fit them in my house. There were just flowers coming all the time, and acts of kindness where I think the street who loved this man and knew him, because he was the guy that was like, oh, you're putting your shed up, I'll be around. And he'd bring the toolbox. Oh, I've got an angle grinder at home. I'll just go and get it. He was sort of known on the street. And you think he made some of his life's meaning, and they've made some of their life meaning by the interactions of kindness that they got to share with each other, and the collective loss they all felt. And as they poured that towards his wife and children, who have remained after he's tragically taken his life, that I heard stories of this, and I thought, and I when I heard it, I think it's the summit of the human experience when you experience kindness.
There is something often hardwired in humans to be able to find compassion and kindness in everyday acts.
Well, now we're talking about everyday acts, which is a good way to swing in to the last paragraph of his letter, where maybe we might be able to resolve our friend from Essex, Bo,
Mm.
and their "What is the point of life?"
Mm.
question. Or we might have to flesh it out some more, but let's have a crack.
Mm.
So, being well read as he is, he quotes the Soviet writer Vasily Grossman, who, which is your favorite book of Vasily Grossman? You know?
Oh, how to pick from my library, how to pick.
Do you read it in the German or in the Russian?
Oh, you must with the Russian.
Oh, yes. Okay. I don't. Yeah.
You lose the point otherwise.
Yeah. Well, what Vasily Grossman refers to it as is petty, thoughtless kindness or unwitnessed kindness, and that's when you know that God knows, or the universe knows that you're actually kind when your behavior is unwitnessed.
What is that called? There's like a term for it.
The Samoans have a term which is le alofa or le molipo, which means the love of the moonlight, because what it's referring to is something that is done in the moonlight when other people can't see it.
Yeah.
Like taking a basket of food around to somebody and leaving it there.
Yeah.
So the alofa le molipo is the idea of something that is done. It's a little parable, I suppose, saying things that are not seen, they're done under, not in darkness, but the light of the moon.
Yeah.
You know, it's when people can't see it.
Yeah.
And that's generally a good barometer of somebody actually being kind, not being connected to, or when you do it yourself, when your nature is like, I want to do it and I don't need anybody to know, I don't need thanks.
Yeah.
But you had another term you were scratching for? What was?
I can't remember it now. I'd have to give it a Google.
Okay. Yeah.
You know when it's right there? Can taste it.
Well,
God, you know what? It'll be the second we turn this off, and I'll be like,
I got it. Well, I like what he says that those unwitnessed kindnesses bind together to create the subterranean and vanquishing good that counterbalances the forces of evil and prevents suffering from overwhelming the world. So I think we all know how terrifying life is. Like there are debts and disease and, we might not have the marauding, invading army coming over the hill to kill us while we were peacefully tilling the soil. But we know that there are just these threats. We saw with COVID, some people were fearful of what it meant, and then they would tell us, oh, there's something new in monkeypox or something. And we are besieged by constant threats. We are a ball floating in the immensity of space, just buoyed up in nothing, spinning around by some physics forces of other things that are swirling around in a giant cosmos that has black holes that will suck you in and asteroids. And we are surrounded from the micro to the macro with threatening ideas. And yet, here upon Earth's plane, we can choose these kindnesses when most of nature, you go watch some animal videos, where it's just hungry and needs to survive.
Yeah.
The hustle's real for those
True brutality.
True brutality
Is the wild.
A human sees a little kitten on the side of the road, and there are those who would put it in a bag and throw it in a river, but there are most that would stop and say, oh, kitty, what are you doing? And pick it up and say, we're going to find you a home. And then I was telling Nana, I was telling my mum the other day, she's like, oh, we don't have foxes in the neighborhood. I've never seen them. I said, Mum, I saw a fox run down the gutter. There were two kittens, lost stray kittens, which was unusual in itself, and just ran up and picked one up and just ran off with it. It's like, food. And, we in the kindnesses, it keeps that, what did he say? This thing that threatens to overwhelm the world. Through kindness, we slant shockingly and miraculously towards meaning. we discover that the smallest gesture of goodwill laid at our feet and our mutual and momental loss is the point.
Mm.
Is it? Is the kindness laid at our feet counterbalanced with the threatening losses of Martians from outer space, asteroids, disease, monkeypox, coronavirus, financial loss? Are those small kindnesses that keep all of the...
What's the last kindness you can think you've encountered?
Oh. The last...
Personally?
Is it a significant kindness?
No, not at all.
Where I recognized it as a kindness was ringing a staff member a couple of hours ago because I couldn't print something, and they answered on the weekend and made it no trouble. And then they actually said to me, because I wanted to print this off, and the laptop I've got isn't connected to the printer in the office, and they were like, do you want me to stay on the... Because I was like, okay, I got it. They said, do you want me to stay on the phone while you make sure it prints? I said, oh, I've got to do some cutting and pasting. And they were like, no, I'll just stay. It's okay. It's a small... What was it called here by Vasily? It was called...
unwitnessed kindness or petty thoughtless kindness.
It was petty kindness. But that was the petty kindness that I experienced 2 hours ago. I had a kindness save me. Can I share it?
Please.
When I was in the darkest part of my life, I was so angry at the world and did not believe in relationships, or I felt like I was left with some carcass of life, like I knew how to breathe and eat, and I'd lost faith in humanity and relationships. I had driven a car from Adelaide to Melbourne. It was a Friday night. I needed to get back. And at 4 o'clock, the car broke down. And to make the story short, they couldn't fix it. They bumped me off to somebody else. I go down there because that's this particular mechanical problem. And it was a little Toyota. And I ended up having some sloppy fix that might get me there. And I got out of Melbourne a little ways on the fringes of the suburbs, and the problem was apparent. And a man, and I mean, I was dark and angry and lost. Like my soul was lost. I thought I couldn't depend on anybody. The world was cold and cruel and selfish and some of these ideas. And this mechanic I pulled into, and he was trying to get out of there. And I pulled in and I said, I've got no money and the car's broken down. I'm supposed to get back this weekend, and it's Friday night, which means, like, for them, it's like, come and see us on Monday. But I'm there going, I can't even stay anywhere. And his wife was ringing him to remind him that it was their daughter's, I think it was 10th birthday party. And I think he was one of those guys that was always like, I'll be there soon. And he was there 3 hours later being told off because he was trying to finish his work. He was caught between that, betwixt the wife who's always telling him off maybe for being late, because he probably always was, and trying to get jobs done so he can provide for it. He was just between something. And he was like telling me of all the stress. And in the end, he looked at me, and I think he could tell how desperate I felt, and I actually was. And I heard him go over to the corner. He didn't know I heard him. And I heard him doing that talk that you do when somebody's yelling at you through the phone. It's your daughter's 10th birthday, and you said you're supposed to be picking up the cake, whatever the conversation was. And I don't blame her. I'm not making a caricature of her. I'm saying I could see him shrinking, and then him going with this voice going, he's stuck. I have to help him. And her just, you've all, like, she couldn't understand. But I actually couldn't understand his extraordinary act of kindness, even in to a stranger, in the face of these important people and his daughter's 10th birthday that he'd promised he'd be there for. And then I'm hearing him go, I'll get there as quick as I can. I'm going to be late. And he sent his other boys, the other mechanics, home, and the lights went on, and he fixed the car for free.
Oh.
And I had a 7-hour drive, I would say, I'd estimate back. And by the time I got home, I would say I was emotionally healed.
Oh.
Yeah.
It's pretty incredible, isn't it?
Hit that act of kindness, while he was being berated for something that might have seemed like a bad habit to his good wife, who had probably put up with a bit. I'm going to make some assumptions. I don't know her. But I was saved from this dark cloud that was over me by a extraordinary, not petty, an extraordinary act of kindness. And
but that's the thing. So many of these petty acts of kindness are actually extraordinary on the other side. You never know.
You never know.
You never know.
Butterfly effect things, little ripples sometimes, and salvation at other times. And he wouldn't even know.
Nah.
That man would have no idea. He would have got home, hopefully walked into a happy family environment. And but I thank him because he saved my spirit. And maybe, Bo, that is the point. That in the small acts, in the big acts of kindness, we find some resolve for all the loss and threats of the terror of life. So go and be kind. Small acts, big acts, there's light there.
Go out and be kind.
Yeah. Go and save. Maybe be saved by one of these extraordinary, sometimes petty, sometimes miraculous acts. Should we get off there?
Yeah, seems like a good spot.
Yeah. Till next time.
All right, see you then.
Bye, folks.